We are here today to have a discussion with Dr. Jacqueline Hughes, who recently assumed charge as Director General at ICRISAT. Welcome, Dr. Hughes, and thank you for joining us today. Before we start, I would like to set the context for today's discussion by stating that the work of CGIAR and its institutes have always been defined by the need for food and nutrition security. So, Dr. Hughes, I begin by asking you, how is the present situation, and generally speaking, a pandemic, different from the threats we are used to?
Thank you, Rohit. That's a critical question at the moment. The pandemic, COVID-19, is unprecedented. It's global. And more than that, we were all unprepared. We didn't expect an epidemic which started in one country to spread globally and to spread in the way it did. And the response to that pandemic is affecting us even more than the immediate human health consequences. So it's very different from all the threats that we've seen in the agriculture sector. And this one is going into the economic, the global environment in a way that many of the threats that we've dealt with in the past have never done.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. What are your plans to shape ICRISAT's response to the present situation, keeping food and nutrition security and supporting livelihoods of the communities we work with in view?
Yes, the current measures that ICRISAT has put in place are appropriate. They absolutely are. As the lockdown lifts, we need proper plans to minimize risk. Minimize risk people, our staff, our communities, our stakeholders, but to minimize risk to our research, on which many of our stakeholders depend. We need to help wherever we can in the short term, but we are a research institution, we're not a humanitarian one. Having said that, the human heart is always there to help, but our help, ICRISAT's help, will be in assuring productivity in the semi-arid tropics.
Going ahead, how do you think COVID-19 has exposed areas in agriculture or along the value chains where more research is needed to strengthen resilience?
That's a very interesting question, because I think what COVID-19 has done is affected globalization. It's affected the global markets. It's had a greater impact to the individuals in urban areas more than the rural areas. So in this case, agriculture in a way has not been particularly affected, unlike with plant pathogens, for example. So the challenge we have is how to get the people back to doing what they should be doing, the farmers back to the farms, rather than thinking of it as an agriculture issue. It is affecting agriculture, but it's the response from governments and how people are having to isolate causing the bigger impact.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for revealing those areas and the big areas where research can make an impact. Are there some lessons for climate action from the COVID-19 crisis in the context of agriculture?
If I could step back and not speak from agriculture per se, but ask everyone to look out of their windows, you'll see that after a mere 6 weeks or so of staying at home and not being able to travel, air quality has improved tremendously. But as a corollary to that, we're not traveling as much. So the international travel we're doing is not there, the local travel is not there. So climate action, I think we're seeing an unprecedented improvement in our environment. Will it last? Regretfully, I doubt that. But the lessons are that if the community, the global community, really gets its act together, it can make a change. We'd seen it a little bit around the China Olympics, where they managed to deal with the air quality in Beijing. This is on a global scale. I was never sure that the whole global community could react in this way. They have, we have. And I think there are very many lessons to be learned for collective action because of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. We will certainly have to look outside the window before we resume what we were doing. Thank you. Moving on, 2020 marked the start of the last decade the world has to achieve the UN SDGs. It was also decided to observe the year as International Year of Plant Health. It now seems pertinent that we should continue observing the year as the International Year of Plant Health, as we recognize that plant diseases and pests can also lead to the food crisis that is now staring at us. How would you like ICRISAT to contribute towards the objectives that UN has set out for the year?
As you probably know, the International Year of Plant Health is very close to my heart as a plant pathologist. And the COVID pandemic has got some links, but this one, COVID, has been, we were totally unprepared for it. Pests and diseases, we generally know what is there. And we often have a solution, whether it's from plant breeding or crop management or deployment of resistance. It's a manageable problem, and I believe that we can contribute very strongly through our crops, through disease management in one way or another, to reaching the goals of the International Year of Plant Health and reaching even further forwards the Sustainable Development Goals.
Locust attacks in East Africa are right now a concern. South Asia too faced crop losses from similar attacks last year. How are the affected farming communities being supported? How do you plan to help in improving resilience in this region?
The locusts are just one facet of a bigger problem of all the pests and diseases. For locusts, as such, with good monitoring systems, biocontrol, we can at least reach towards solving individual outbreaks. But it is part of a broader picture where inputs, cropping systems, management, human interactions all form part of a system which then allows individual pests and diseases to come up and become epidemics, to become swarms that can spread. So although locusts are incredibly important, we must look at the broader picture.
Amidst all that is happening, young and aspiring researchers would like to hear more about you. Stay motivated. So can you please tell us what drew you to agriculture research? What were the triggers and the motivation?
Oh, that goes back a long time. I grew up in a family where there was a soil chemist, a bacteriologist, and a marine biologist. So the science was always there, the research was there. But I also grew up in rural areas where I admired the knowledge and wisdom of traditional farmers. They couldn't always see their way out to something better, but they certainly knew how to manage their environment. Added to that, it was those poor farmers who provide our food. And I was driven from a very early age to try and help the poor farmers, their families, and their children to have a better life. So as I went through schooling with some of those very people, through university and onwards, there was always a focus on improving the livelihoods of the poor farmers, and in a way focusing on their children so that those children would have a better life.
Attracting youth to agriculture is essential for ensuring food security. Yeah. What do you think needs to be done to bring more youth to agriculture in Asia and Africa?
That's $1 million question. I think the only way forward is for agriculture to become profitable again. If it was profitable, we wouldn't have farmers leaving the land. And then this is exacerbated by the youth leaving. So we need to make it profitable, which includes value chains, it includes markets, inputs, all of that. But focusing on the youth, the ones particularly who've gone to the cities, probably modern technology and tools be very important. Because everybody, I think, with the challenge of going somewhere that they've left because they wanted something different. What's in it for me? Why should I go back to farming? Hopefully the answer will be because it is profitable.
Farming has to be made profitable indeed, bring youth to the agriculture. A related question here, Dr. Hughes, is making farming sustainable also depends on achieving gender equality. What are your plans for promoting gender equality in agriculture?
I would start with gender equity. Gender equity is a process to achieve equality from different starting points, and in many of our communities, the women are starting at a different point to the men. Within ICRISAT's research, we need to look at many of the things we do through a gender lens, not just counting so many women trained, so many men trained. No, look at the research, project proposals with a gender lens. How will it affect women and men? Will it undermine one or the other? We shouldn't be looking at women apart from the men. We should be looking at both together, but through gender equity, empowering the women to step up to the same level as the men.
Another question here about ICRISAT's mandate crops. Our crops are well poised to diversify diets for enhancing nutrition. Initiatives like Smart Food aim to cultivate consumer change to help these crops go from the farm to the fork. What can the agriculture research community do to improve markets and ensure more support for such?
Thank you for that one. I think perhaps the profitability comes into that as well, but consumer pull. If the consumer isn't interested, it won't go anywhere because agriculture is a business. And new products need proof of concept to the consumers, the farmers as well. And how do we get consumer to change? If the product is better, maybe tastier, cheaper, healthier, that should pull the consumer towards the product. But we need to work very closely because it's context specific, culturally specific, and trying to change the taste of a community, of a country, is really difficult.
And what are your plans for leveraging digital agriculture to fulfill ICRISAT's commitments to the drylands?
I think the COVID-19 pandemic, with the fact that we're all working from home, or most of us except the frontliners are working from home, shows how increasingly data-driven the world is getting at all levels. For agriculture, most farmers would benefit from timely access to information, whether it's market information, weather information, water availability. The current pandemic has highlighted opportunities and possibilities. So much data is available, so much data needs to be managed, but also there is this fake news. There's information which is not true. So there needs to be a trusted advisor, a trusted mentor of the data, which for the semi-arid tropics, I believe should be ICRISAT, to ensure that quality information is available to all that need it.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for outlining that. What are your plans for strengthening collaborations in the Global South, mainly for the benefit of agriculture in Africa?
It's interesting that we talk about the Global South. I believe that everyone can learn from each other. And the experiences of those countries south is very, very pertinent. Collaboration sounds easy. It's not always that smooth. We have different expectations of each other. But if the partnerships are with mutual respect, equal and mutual respect, the partnership and the collaboration works much better. Africa is where much of the funding is and is likely to be. And in order to work closely South-South, we need to make sure that the needs are correctly identified, the quick wins, the sustainability, and above all, to be proactive. Just sitting back and waiting for money, collaboration to land on our knees isn't going to happen. We need to be proactive to make sure that the South-South collaboration works and that we're able to support it and move forwards in a collaborative way.
This is an interesting one. If overseeing ICRISAT's operations during COVID-19 is on the top of your to-do list, what is the next big thing on it?
Well, I'm not sure if overseeing is quite the right word. ICRISAT's had extremely good leadership over the COVID issue, and what I see in place at the moment, I couldn't ask for more, but oversee it I will. There are many, many things that I would like to look at in more detail. This is the first few days at a new job, but I could see that perhaps business development and fundraising, particularly for Africa, looking at the one CGIAR and how that will affect us. Our people, looking at the balance of our people, gender, diversity. Do we have the right people in the right places? Are they correctly rewarded? Do they feel comfortable? And above all, with the oversight of COVID-19, to ensure a stable and successful institution forwards.
You have a message for staff at ICRISAT?
First and foremost, keep well, keep healthy in this pandemic. But as we move forwards, anticipate a new normal when we get back to the office, to the field. Things will be a bit different. I think it will take a long time before we're back what you might have thought as the old normal. But I want to reassure you all that the vision and mission is incredibly important for many, many farmers and their communities in Africa and South Asia. So that will continue. But we have to take care of ourselves and our institution in this very complicated time and ensure that when we can get back to the full working capacity, that we are ready to do so in the safest way.
Before we conclude, I'd like to ask you if you'd like to convey a message to our funders and partners.
Yes, indeed. I would like to thank them for their support, their very generous support, not only financially, but morally, and as we move through the pandemic, with their openness and willingness to be flexible. I want to reassure everyone that ICRISAT is continuing to work with all the necessary restrictions, working from home, virtual, and we're looking forward to continuing with the support of the funders and partners through the pandemic, and as we go to the new normal. We will deliver on our commitments to funders, partners, and the poor, the semi-arid tropics. It may take a little time, which I'm sure everyone can understand, but our focus is there and we will do it.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes, and thank you for being here with us today. We wish you all the best and we welcome you to ICRISAT.
And the pleasure is mine. Thank you.